Hey everybody, this is Craig Garber. Welcome to Everyone Loves Guitar, and we got such a cool, super talented guest with us today with the one and only Nate Wood. Nate is like an amazingly talented guy. He's equally proficient in guitar, bass, and drums. And let me just read his background quickly. I just want to thank Donny McCaslin, our mutual friend, for hooking us up. Thanks, Donny. Nate's the founding member of Grammy-nominated quintet called Kneebody. In 2009, their 12 Songs of Charles Ives album was nominated for a Grammy for Best Classical Crossover, and their newest record entitled Chapters was released on Edition Records, and it features Nate playing drums and bass simultaneously. Again, you'll need to watch this, because if I tell you that someone's doing something in bass and drums simultaneously and keyboards, synth keyboards, it's one thing, but when you visually watch this guy do this, it's completely mind-blowing. It's like something you'd see if there was like a music circus, and not in a freak show way, just like in a holy crap way. Nate's released 3 solo records which blend funk, jazz, and really good grooves. He played all the instruments on them, those not simultaneously. He was slacking on those. His current solo project is called Nate Wood 4, and it features Nate playing drums, bass, synth, and singing at the same time. The first record is it just called Exit?
Exit, yep.
Exit. Okay, it's x.it, but it's Exit. And that was the first album released for the 4 project. And it was also featured on the NPR's Tiny Desk concert series. And some of his albums, videos for these records have topped over 1 million views. As a sideman, Nate's performed or recorded with artists including jazz pianist Tigran Hamasyan, Donny McCaslin, and Wayne Krantz, who are both on this show if you want to check those out. Taylor Hawkins and the Coattail Riders, Dave Grohl, Brian May and Roger Taylor from Queen, of course, Chris Squire from Yes, Chaka Khan, and many others, or Chaka Khan, I should say. Chaka Khan. Do you remember that song?
Yep, that's what I was quoting. Yep.
Yeah. Let me love you, Chaka Khan. Nate placed in the, we're revealing our age. Nate placed in the 2015 Modern Drummers Readers Poll among the top 5 drummers in the fusion category. And he's also featured on the cover of Drumhead magazine. He's a world-renowned mastering engineer as well. He's mastered records from all around the world with artists like The Calling, John Tesh, Theo Bleckman. Theo did work with, if I'm not mistaken, Ben Monder.
Yep.
Yeah, he's a super talented guy, man. Great vocalist. The White Buffalo, again, Taylor Hawkins and Coattail Riders, Adam Rogers, who we had on here, and hundreds of others. Again, it's one thing to listen to something like Nate plays all the instruments at once, but you got to see this. So I'd love you to do is, after this interview, go to YouTube and check out, at a minimum, Nate Wood Rabbit, because that just takes your interest and curiosity for what Nate does to another level. He's an incredibly talented guy, and thank you for your time. I appreciate you coming on the show, man.
Awesome, thanks.
You're in Queens, right?
I'm in Queens, yep.
What's going on up there today? Everything cool?
Everything's cool. Yeah, my wife and I live across the street from a park. So there's like a dog park right outside of our window.
Oh, very cool.
Children's park on the other side. So it's kind of like some weird suburban dream, like from the 50s or something.
That's great to get that to city.
Amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's awesome.
And then
man.
We're a few blocks from the train, so we kind of have the best of both worlds.
Is the weather like gross?
It's actually not too bad. It's like, a medium summer.
That's
weather,
great.
90. Yeah, it hasn't been too horrible. There have been a few bad days, but it's not like the West Coast.
It's not like down here either. It's like a sauna at 6 a.m. Yeah, it's pretty bad.
No thanks.
I went out the other morning to walk.
New York has those years too, so it happens to everybody.
That's what I was asking. Well, cool. So you didn't grow up in the city. Tell me where you grew up and how did you first get into music?
I grew up in Laguna Beach, California, which is an hour south of LA. And I grew up there when it was more of a middle-class town, artist, hippie burnout town. They have a lot of art fairs every summer, and it's like people just smoke weed all year and then just make a few clay pots and paper. At least looking back on it, that's how it seemed. It was at the time. I'm sure it was more complicated than that, but
that's a Wikipedia entry, man. Laguna Beach.
Right, exactly. But now I think it's obviously now it's insanely expensive and it's a totally different thing than when I grew up there. But both my parents are musicians, so I grew up playing music with my parents. My both my parents met in a band in the early 70s called Honk.
That's very cool.
That band was kind of a local hero band. They had a few huge record deals. They toured a bunch, like opening for Santana, Chicago, the Beach Boys, and stuff like that. And my dad went on to work with Kenny Loggins from his association with Honk, because Kenny, I think Honk maybe opened for Loggins and Messina or something like that. And Kenny was just blown away by Honk. I think that's the story. So he hired the drummer from Honk, Tristan Bowden, and he eventually hired my dad too.
Tristan Bowden was the drummer for Honk?
Yeah.
He's like a well-known fusion jazz drummer now, isn't he?
I mean, he's more he would love it if you said that. I think he's more of like a rock drummer, but with those leanings as well. He's just a really well-rounded, amazing drummer. He was my original one of my few original inspirations for playing the drums, for sure. But my dad and him went to high school together. Steve Wood is the name of my dad. So
Steve Wood.
Yeah.
And your dad's a guitar player?
No, he plays mostly piano and sings. But he kind of plays everything a little bit. And he for like the last 30 years he's scored IMAX movies and produced records and stuff like that, and stayed off the road.
That's really great.
Yeah.
That's really, your folks still together?
They're still together. Yeah. They're just officially retired now, but they just tour themselves, just playing weird towns in Oregon and stuff like that. And, so that's how they met. And that's still what they're doing all the time, is just playing together and stuff. So it's pretty awesome.
That's a really good story that they're still together. That's a long period of time,
It is. I know, especially for musicians, and especially for two musicians,
Yeah.
The more I talk to people, because my wife is a great musician too. She's a bass player, Jessica Hume. We have a project together called WeU, where we both write and sing and contribute and stuff like that. And everybody that I talk to is like, wow, how is it working with your significant other? Isn't it hard? It's like, no, it's not hard. It's super easy, which is how my parents are too. They just can do it. It just takes a certain kind of ego or lack thereof, I think, to be in a relationship like that,
Well, I mean, being in a relationship is not easy with anybody. For that, it's you gotta work, man.
Yeah. But when it becomes creative and you're your art is involved, it's like it can be a whole other mesh of things. But
interesting.
My parents were good role models, so
that's awesome. Yeah, congratulations on that, man. That's really cool.
Thank you.
My kids are always we've been together almost 30 years, and my kids are they're so proud of it, because none of their friends, they're the only ones who have the original cassette.
It's really, I mean, humans are such simple creatures. I think just the way that sets people up for their lives is amazing. Just from what I've seen, just from how I view the landscape of all my friends, and a lot of my friends whose parents stayed together, they marry somebody that they stay with. It kind of just seems to pass on. Because it's kind of learned behavior, because we're not really that smart. I mean, we are, but you know what I mean?
No, we're not that smart.
Simple. Yeah.
I agreed with that. I just wrote it down.
It's pretty simple. So, so anyway, you're setting a great example for your children, is what I'm saying.
Well, you know what? Here's the funny thing about that. Well, thank you. But at the same time, one of my kids kept going back to this relationship that was going nowhere. And I said, do you think, I think you're looking at Mom and I, and that's bad in a way, right?
Totally.
And Mo's my daughter, and she said, yeah, because you're married, you get to, and she's my youngest too. So she, things by the third, it's like you iron out a lot of the kinks, and so it works both ways, I guess. But yeah, thanks.
Sure, but then when she knows, she'll know, and then it's,
Yeah. Oh, I'm one of these people. I'm done. They're all older. I'm supportive of them. That's their lane,
Right. You're just watching. Right.
Yeah. I'm just a spectator now. So unless when they want me to come in and pinch hit.
Right.
So my next question was, what was your childhood like? But it sounds like you had a great childhood and your parents are super supportive.
Yeah, it was amazing. I was, it couldn't have been better. I feel like I was born in 79. So I was raised in the 80s, and I feel like that was probably the peak of America and the American dream and all that stuff. It was great. I mean, I grew up, well, whatever. The birth rate was higher. It was easier to afford houses for people. Our street was just littered with children. You know, I grew up with tons of kids on my street, you know, and so I just walked outside and just played every day, you know.
Yeah.
And then you know, with all people from all walks of life, you know, like in terms of income and everything.
Yeah.
You know?
Racial
So
background. And, yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So it was pretty amazing way to grow up. And then really safe school, really safe town, and then really great musicians there too, in Laguna Beach at that time. So actually, funny story. I was thinking about this because you know I used to play soccer in 5th grade in my elementary school, and I'm like, oh, there's Taylor practicing Rush tunes. I could hear Taylor because Taylor Hawkins.
Taylor Hawkins. That is hilarious, man.
Yeah, because he lived right by the high school, and he played super loud even when he was, you know, however old he was at that point in high school or something.
That's
But I could
wild.
hear he had, you know, I kind of still remember the sound of his toms at that point, you know, like probably no bottom heads, you know, lots of them working on Neil Peart riffs, you know. So
That is wild, man.
so that's kind of what I grew up around. And then I started playing with my parents when I was 13. I played in bars with them.
That must have been really cool.
Yeah, it was amazing. It was still some of my most memorable experiences playing music, to be honest. But yeah, because it was at a time where there were more gigs like that where you could just do a 4-hour set, you know, like four sets or whatever. And there's not as many opportunities like that for musicians to play that long anymore. So as like a 15-year-old playing, you know, 4 hours a night, I got better so fast, you know. Also because I was playing with my parents who were great. So pretty amazing.
That's great. And you weren't thinking about money at that point either. So that sets a whole level away.
You know what? I was actually, because I was thinking about, like, you know, part of my parents' thing was just like, well, God, if you're going to be a musician, like, you better, you know, they kind of forced me to take piano lessons, and that really backfired because I hated piano, and I didn't really start playing piano again until about 5 years ago, because I'd had a really bad teacher who kind of just wanted to hear my nails on the keyboard and didn't really care about the music, and I didn't understand how it related to drums, you know. So then I got really into guitar. I bought a guitar, like a Charvel, white Charvel with the Floyd Rose on it, and my parents were like, "Okay, you don't have to play piano anymore because it's clear you're going to learn music." You know.
Okay.
So making money, like, or taking care of myself was kind of always in the cards. You know, like I always kind of thought that way, just because I was taught that way. You know. So,
that's great.
But I remember at the time it was like, you know, I'd make the band would make $400. That was in like 93 or whatever. So it was like everybody made $100, which at that time is like, wow, it's so much money, especially when you're a 13-year-old. So
yeah.
Anyway, I was thinking about all that, but anyway.
Well, that's cool. You shouldn't have to, wasn't your responsibility to get it sorted, which is good.
That's right. No, I could just buy cymbals and drum heads and stuff like that, you know?
Yeah, $100 when you're 13 or 14, even 15 is quite a bit of money.
Yeah, it is a lot of money. But also drum heads are really expensive, and I had a 7-piece drum set. So, you know, buying drum heads for that was pretty expensive. So I spent it all.
So what you started playing guitar first then?
No, drums. I consider myself a drummer. I started playing guitar when I was around 12. I started playing drums. I played drums from the ages of 2 to 4, and then I quit because I had a real inferiority complex. I did.
I quit. I was
quit.
4. I'm like, I'm sick of this.
My parents said that I was always like, man, I'm so bad at this instrument. I just can't play it anymore. And that's where my head was at when I was 4.
Really?
Yeah. So I put them in the closet and didn't play any music until I was 9, until they showed me a video of me playing when I was 4. And I was like, that was really fun. I should get those out again. And I started playing again. So I started playing drums at 9, and then I started playing guitar at 12 because I couldn't practice the drums past 5 p.m. because we lived next to neighbors who really couldn't stand the noise.
Sure.
So that's when I started playing guitar. And I had a Charvel, white Charvel with a Floyd Rose, and a Metal Zone. And I was in heaven. It was just like, life couldn't get better than that.
And when did you pick up bass?
Bass was probably 15 or 16. All my friends who were good bass players moved to Boston to go to Berkeley. Like my good friend Billy Moeller, who I was in the calling with, he went to study jazz at Berkeley. And I was like, well, there's not really any bass players in our school, so I'm going to buy a bass and start playing gigs. And I bought a bass, and I was playing gigs in like a day, 2 days. So
and you just bought it because you wanted to play bass.
yeah, because I was just like, hey, there's a niche here that I can I can fill, and I might as well just like, because nobody's around and I feel like I could probably do this. So
So at what point did you start pursuing each or any of these instruments with this like focus of greatness? And I don't mean to put you on the spot, but like you don't become very good like you are, like casually. There's a deliberate action behind that.
Thanks. Yeah, no, there definitely is. I really only ever set out to be a good drummer, a good drummer, at least by my definition of what good is. So I put the most time into that instrument, and then the other instruments, I kind of was just like, hey, I'm going to have fun with these instruments, but I, fell in love with them in different ways, and so I got better at them than maybe I thought I would have. Like I put a fair amount of time into practicing bass, but really not that much. Really, what happened was, this is just some old school stuff. I just gigged all the time.
Yeah.
I bought a bass and I started playing 4 hours a night. Like there was one summer where I played every night for 4 or 5 hours. I was maybe 18 or 19 and I was playing with the top 40 band and I had to learn 100 songs, 150 songs. I don't read music and I learned it all by ear. And I remember at the time thinking like, this drummer's not very good. Like I'm not really getting much out of this. Like I don't really like the feel of this drummer, and this is probably going to be a waste of my time. But then after that summer, I was like, oh, this is now just one of my extra limbs. I can just play the bass. It's easy for me.
Wow.
It was one of those things about just like, yeah, you just do the repetitive motions over and over and over and over and over again, past where your body thinks it's useful, and then that's when you get good.
So you get your 10,000 hours in one summer.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, kind of. And then with the bass, I didn't really play it between the ages of, I'd say 24 and 31, probably 23 and 31, something like that.
Why?
Well, because I was mostly playing with Kneebody, playing the drums, and playing, doing a lot of sessions. At that time I lived in LA, and I was doing a lot of sessions at the time too. Like I worked a lot with this guy, Bear McCreary, this composer. So like a lot of this Battlestar Galactica drums are me, and like Walking Dead and all that stuff. So I was doing a lot more of that kind of work in LA.
So you were doing a lot of like stuff on licensing. You were playing on a lot of TV soundtracks.
Yeah, like TV soundtracks. Yeah, totally. So and some movie soundtracks and a lot of like singer-songwriter stuff, and just wasn't really playing the bass very much, except when I would play drums and bass at the same time, which at that point, honestly, I kind of thought of it just as a parlor trick,
Right.
But there were a couple groups where I did that with. I did it with this guy Keaton Simons, and I did it with this singer-songwriter Richard Steckel, and I did it sometimes with Kneebody. So
how did that come about, man? Like,
yeah, so I in my early 20s, when I was playing with a lot of singer-songwriters in LA, I would start playing drums with them because usually the bass player, usually Kaveh Rastegar, would recommend me.
It's funny. This is I'm sorry to cut you off.
That's okay.
Right after, like 2 weeks ago, I got hooked up with Kaveh.
Oh, cool.
And so I'm doing research on him, and I'm like, oh, he was in Kneebody.
Yeah.
And then, so when I spoke, I told him, I said, Nate's coming. He goes, listen, he goes, can I please let me come on after Nate? He's like one of my heroes. I really just want to listen to his interview before I do it. I said, yeah, it's just the timing works out. Yeah, he was a very nice guy.
That's so cool. Yeah, he's such an amazing bass player too. He's one of the only living electric bass players that has an immediately identifiable sound too, I think. Like,
whoa, that's a pretty bold statement. Yeah.
Like, because the electric bass, it's like, okay, 9 out of 10 people play a Fender P bass, which, come on, it's the best bass. I play P bass. So how are you going to make that instrument sound different? But somehow Kaveh does. He makes it work in a multitude of situations, like Kneebody, which is crazy ass music, and he plays with John Legend, and he makes it work in all those. But he always sounds like himself, which is
that's so cool,
pretty amazing. So I think he's a really important bass player.
Kaveh, see, you got your 15 minutes, bro. There you go.
Yeah, I love Kaveh. So, but anyway, at that time, Kaveh would recommend me, which was really great. And so one of the artists he recommended me for was this guy, Keaton Simons. And I played a bunch of drums with Keaton and with Kaveh playing bass. And eventually we would do rehearsals, and Keaton had 2 guitar players, and eventually I just picked up a guitar while we were rehearsing, and he's like, "Oh shit, you play guitar?" And I was like, "Yeah, I play guitar." And he's like, "Well, why don't you play guitar a little bit in this band?" And I'm like, "Okay." So there would be a period of that where I would sing backgrounds and play guitar with people. And then eventually the bass would be open and I would play the bass, and be like, Keaton's like, "Well, you're a good bass player. Do you want to play bass on this next gig? Because I have a drummer lined up and Kaveh can't do it." So eventually I would kind of get to all the instruments in one band, which is still what I do. Like with Wayne Krantz, I play bass or drums, and with Donny, I play bass or drums. So it's kind of still what I do. So anyway, with Keaton Simons, there was a gig where he was opening for, I think, Robin Hitchcock in Northern California. And he said, "We can only fit 2 people on stage. Have you ever played bass and drums at the same time?"
No, someone actually suggested that.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
And I was like, I haven't, let's try it. So we had a rehearsal, and I put the bass on my back and I was like, "Oh, first things first, you got to raise the strap, because if the strap's too low, then your knee will bump into it every time you play the bass drum," right? So that was the first adjustment. And then I was like, I can kind of do this actually, because I know all the songs already, and drums really only take one hand. Like if you're going to play like for instance, everything Charlie Watts has ever done, you can do with one hand.
Okay.
There's literally not one thing that he's ever done that you can't do with one hand.
He's a very simplistic. It's
groove. Great. I love his drumming. I'm not discounting anything.
No.
Because he does this thing where he goes, he never plays the snare and the hi at the same time.
Right.
You can do that with one hand.
Yeah.
So basically when I'm playing with one hand, I'm like Charlie Watts. But, obviously really different. But so anyway, I found that I could kind of do it. So we started doing that duo project like that, and I would sing backgrounds and I would play bass and drums at the same time. And we did that for about 6 months, and he would have, 1 or 2 gigs a week or something like that. So I kind of got okay at it. And then he recommended me for some other singer-songwriters so we could go on tour together, and we could be like somebody else's backing band kind of
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I got really comfortable with it. And there was a certain thing that I liked about it. Like there's a kind of like understated power that the bass player has, by choosing substitution notes or pedaling on stuff, that once I had the power to do that and play drums at the same time, I was like, this is amazing. I love this. So I always really liked it. But at the same time, I'd never seen anybody else do it. So I kind of just thought of it as like, this is ridiculous. Like, this is kind of like a parlor trick,
Yeah.
But then Kaveh started to get really famous and go on tour with John Legend and Ligabue and all these big artists. So eventually we started having subs in Kneebody. And we had a bunch of great subs. We had Tim LaFave would play bass, Sam and I would play bass, or Mark Juliana would play drums and I'd play bass. But we did a couple tours where I played both. And, the first couple gigs would be hellaciously terrible. And then we'd get 3 or 4 gigs in and it'd be like, this is pretty good actually. So that's kind of how that came about.
That's sorry, I'm just taking notes. I feel like I need to pass you one of these. Because I'm using them myself.
Oh yeah. Now I'm having a water issue in my basement, so there's kind of like a slight moisture issue down here. So
oh, that sucks, man. Just want to give a quick shout out to Tim LaFave. He's the best. He's a great guy.
He is the best. I love Tim.
So when you're playing bass though, you don't miss any notes. That's what's like, you're only using your left hand.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple things you can't do. Like you can't go da 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 on one note. You can't do that. But luckily for me, I don't like that anyway. I don't like the sound of bass players doing that, and I don't like doing it myself.
Right.
So like, I'm not a Jocko fan in terms of like, that's not how I want to play the bass. I love Jocko. He's one of the absolute geniuses of the instrument, if not the most genius, but not how I want to play bass, which is very conducive to playing with one hand.
Right.
The other thing is that playing an open E string with a 4-string is a total bitch. So you kind of have to play a 5-string, because if you're going like, you can't. You have to pluck the string like this if it's an open string, and it sounds really, really strange.
Okay.
So those are the only 2 things to keep in mind. Otherwise, you can kind of do everything. You just have to learn how to get dynamics out of playing like this, you know, which is weird because when you're playing guitar, you're kind of trying to keep all these as minimal as you can, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Because you don't want all that string noise and you want like pressure so you can get the best tone and all that stuff.
Yeah, clean notes.
Yeah. And when you're playing like this, it's the exact opposite. It's like you're playing a keyboard. You know?
Yeah.
But you still want to learn how to get warmth and attack and all that stuff out of playing just with your hand, you know? So.
Well, it's funny you say that because your playing is very warm.
Oh, thanks.
And that's what I was like, what the hell? How the hell is he doing that?
Oh, thanks. Well, so it's just a common bass setup. I don't change the string gauge or the action at all. I'm always playing through an octave pedal and a distortion pedal, and that really helps.
Yeah.
But when I play like folk music, I just play straight into the amp, and it sounds fine. So
that's just amazing, man. Yeah. Well,
thanks.
Kudos to you. I've never seen that, but to have it to watch it done with such finesse and like great tone, and I don't know how it's almost like I'm looking for a third arm or at least a third leg or something like that, but it's
Thanks.
great. Congratulations.
Thank you.
How did you initially, so you were playing gigs at home in Laguna Beach. How did you progress from there? What was your initial, how did you get started in the music business, I guess?
Yeah, well, so I think I was pretty okay by the time I was 16. Like I was already playing good time, playing good solid rock drums with frills, so, the people that my parents had on gigs would sometimes recommend me for stuff at that point,
Okay.
And then, it was also as simple as like, I'm playing at a club that's across from another club, and the band on break is like, who's that drummer? Who's that bass player? Do you want to play next week?
Okay.
Real old school.
So because you were out all the time, you were in traffic.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
And at that time, it was like people aren't on their phones during the break. They're like, "What's the band across the street doing? Oh, they sound kind of good, actually. I'm going to go over there and have a beer during my break."
Gotcha.
I'm like, wait, this bass player's good, or drummer, or whatever I was playing. So, by the time the summer of my senior year of high school, I played 8 gigs a week minimum.
Wow.
Yeah, like I was playing 4-hour gigs all around LA. 2 gigs a day sometimes. All kinds of music, like jazz, like casuals, blues gigs, funk gigs with 10-piece bands, everything. Mostly playing drums at that point. So I was basically kind of just in the music industry already, and that's another kind of thing like we were talking about before. It's learned behavior. My parents were making money playing music, and they gave me the tools that I needed to, go out into the world. My dad's really hard on drummers because he grew up playing with Tris, this is like a folkloric kind of story, but it's so great because I actually heard the proof of it the other day by accident. But my dad was saying the first record he cut with Kenny Loggins was a record called Alive.
Mm-hmm.
And they just took a 24-track tape machine and recorded all the gigs, right? So back then, nobody played to a click or anything. And there's a song on there called Love Has Come of Age. And the first minute and a half of that song is from the first gig of the tour in Santa Barbara during the daytime. And the second half of the song is from a night show 4 months later in Santa Barbara again. Exact same tempo.
That's amazing, man.
Exact same tempo. The tempo never moved. And that's Tris. Tris is just like, you could like build a house on that guy.
That's awesome.
In terms of his drumming. So that's what I grew up like. I'm never going to be as good as Tris, but I'll try.
But that was your standard. So that
was my standard. It was just like, I'm never going to live up to that guy, but I'll just try. I'll just try to do as good as I can. So that was just what I was striving for. So I guess that kind of gave me the tools to be working early on.
Yeah.
And then of course, the direction shifts. When I buy certain records, like I bought Secrets by Alan Holdsworth, and I was like, oh. Damn, like that was a shifter. Or I bought like Wayne Krantz 2 Drink Minimum, and that was another like, oh my god, I got to go this way, or whatever, like a Bill Frisell record or whatever. All these records. So, but yeah, so that's how I got into the music industry. And then when I was going to school, I was still just playing all the time and doing auditions and stuff like that, and stuff like that. So yeah.
You just a side question, if you know the answer to this. did your dad have to audition for Kenny at his house, at Kenny's house?
I don't think so. I think, you know what it was, is Kenny saw my dad play with Honk and was like,
Okay. Then
I need that guy.
I need that. Okay.
Because my dad is like, he's an unbelievable singer. Like he is like a shatter, like the windows with a high C kind of guy.
Wow.
But he can also like sing the hell out of a blues. Like he's just like this like crazy presence. And he plays like he's a real bright light on stage. Like he kind of understands how music should go together. And every band sounds better when he's in it, you know?
That's nice.
So it's like Kenny saw that and was like, that's the guy I need. And so my dad was like the musical director for, you know, most of the time that he was with them. And they wrote a bunch of songs together and stuff like that. So
that's cool. The reason I asked is I've had like probably 3 or 4 of Kenny's guitar players over the years, and like maybe a bass player and a drummer. And everybody goes to his house. Everybody starts the story off, well, I met Kenny at his house. I'm like yeah. Everybody does that. So he
Kenny
just auditions people
really
there.
high standards. And
yeah,
I'm sure,
very much.
Yeah. So
that's the other thing I hear.
Yeah, he's really meticulous. And that's the thing. If you hear that a live record, it's just like those guys sound unbelievable. That band sounds so good. Like,
what was the name of that song?
I think that was called Love Has Come of Age. But that whole record is like, you know, Tris was like 29 or something like that, and my dad's on it, and Neil Larson's on it, and just the band is so ridiculous. I've done a bunch of playing with Tim Landers, this bass player, great bass player, and he said he lived in New York at the time, and he was playing with Billy Cobham, which kind of a big deal.
yeah, I think.
And he was a real snob about like, yeah, East Coast jazz all the way. Like we just, you know, the West Coast guys are just total hacks. And he said Billy Cobham opened for Kenny, and he was like, oh my God, these guys are unbelievable. I'm moving to the West Coast. Like that's how good they were.
Oh, wow.
You know? Like he did a complete 180 about his entire life because he thought the Kenny Loggins band was so good.
That's really cool. That says a lot.
Yeah, totally.
All right. I'm going to talk about some artists that you worked with.
Okay.
Tell me how you connected with them, and if you have an interesting story about working with them. Let's start with Taylor. I guess you knew him.
Well, not really though. So that's a good one. So Taylor was an absolute legend around Laguna because he's a huge personality, as everybody in the entire universe knows now. Mm-hmm. He was always like that. Like he was a rock star stuck in Laguna Beach when he was a kid, you know. And he loved Neil Peart, and he had this like really infectious thing, and he was about like a love of music. And don't lend Taylor any of your drum gear because he will break it. You know? He was just an animal back then. Like all my friends were like, oh man, I lent my bass drum pedal to Taylor and he broke it again, you know? And I remember at the time, like when I was in high school, he taught drum lessons and like sold drums at this like music store out in the canyon, you know? And it was like, people were just like, man, you go in there and Taylor's just kind of like talks your ear off and then just shreds on the drums. And he's just like so full of passion and just like, and it was kind of just like overwhelming because it's like, dude, you're kind of just working in a music store right now. But then it's like, whoa, you got the Alanis Morissette gig. Like it was really just like, whoa, you know, and he sounded amazing. He already sounded amazing, obviously. But, and then, you know, then you got the Foo Fighters gig, and there's nobody in the world who could do that better than him.
Yeah, I agree.
So the way that I met him actually was not from, I didn't grow up with him. He was, you know, maybe 10 years older than me or something like that. The only time that I met him before I joined his band was he was like walking around Laguna with some friends, and he saw me playing drums with this Gypsy King cover band. And he was like, hey, Nate, man, you need bigger cymbals. And that was it. I was playing like these small, like fusion, like 13-inch, like samba cymbals.
Nate, you need bigger cymbals.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, yeah.
Just dropping pearls of wisdom all over Laguna Beach.
Like, well, I'm trying to keep it down. Like the singer's playing like you know, like nylon string guitar and stuff like that. But so anyway, the reason that he asked me to join the band is because he knew about me because of that Laguna, just like I knew about him.
Right.
And he was like, I want somebody who can sing falsetto, play good guitar, but then also jump on the drums when I want to go out front and sing. So
let me cut you off 1 second. I didn't mention that your voice is great.
Oh, thank you.
It's really nice, man. And it's almost an afterthought because I'm just focusing on my like my jaw's generally just like at the ground when I'm watching and listening. But your voice is awesome. Did you train for that, or is that just?
No, I'm still working on it. I'm getting somewhere. It's one of those hang-ups I have because both my parents are like phenomenal singers, and I'm just kind of like, someday I'll be that good. I probably will never be that good, but you know, I'm just.
But your
for
voice
me, it's a vehicle.
is
Thank
really
you.
good. No, man, I wouldn't.
Thank you.
Yeah, don't beat yourself up on that. You have a real good, very good voice, man. And
I appreciate it. Thank you. But I grew up. I mean, I'm a really good background singer because I'm really good at blending. These are two different skills, by the way. It's kind of like when you hear Bono sing and then you hear the Edge sing, and you're kind of like, the Edge actually sounds like a better singer until you hear him solo, and you're like, oh, it's not the same thing.
Yeah, he does that one song, Van Diemen's Land, which I love that song, but it is, right. It's not Bono.
It doesn't carry the same way. A lead singer carries, you know.
Yeah.
And a background singer blends are two different things. I'm a really good background singer. So anyway, with Taylor, I was singing background, singing like the high female parts, you know, and he can sing really high. He's an unbelievable singer, by the way. Natural singer, sang perfectly in tune every night, playing this like crazy stuff in 7 at, you know, 150 decibels, and he's just singing perfectly over it every night. So anyway, but the original idea was that I was going to play guitar and then play drums sometimes. But we did one rehearsal where I played a little bit of drums, and he got out front with the mic, and he was kind of like, he didn't know what to do with his hands. He was like, you know what? I'm going to stay on the drums. I was like, okay. So that was the band. I never actually got to play drums in that band. I just played guitar. But
right,
you know, it worked out because the other guitar player in that band was this guy Gannon Arnold, who's this like Jeff Beck meets Holdsworth, just absolute shredder. He's like just an unbelievable guitar player, and so he would take all the lead stuff, and I would do kind of like the indie Space Jam Memory Man stuff and sing falsetto backgrounds. So, but playing with Taylor was unbelievable. It was kind of like a Forrest Gump thing, because at that time it was like, I'm touring with Kneebody, and then I'll go on tour with Taylor, and like, especially the second tour, it was like we were touring all around Europe with Them Crooked Vultures,
right?
And
that's a nice
setup. And Grohl would sit in every time, like every time we shared a bill, Grohl would sit in and play 2 or 3 songs with us, you know.
On guitar or on drums?
No, play drums.
Play drums, okay.
And Taylor would actually go out front because he's like, Dave wants to play drums. I'm going to go out front, you know.
Okay.
So, and rumor has it is that Dave wanted to go on tour with us, but his wife was like, no, you're staying home. You know, Dave just like wants to hang and tour and play, and you know.
Well, I'll ask. God, sorry, I was going to ask you about Wayne, but I want to know about Wayne next. But I was just thinking, did you play drums with Wayne?
Yeah, drums and bass. Yeah,
drums and bass.
Not at the same time.
Yeah, okay. But, all right, finish. You can finish Taylor or before we get into.
Oh yeah, so I'll just say like that was the cool thing about that thing was like playing, you know, sharing the bill with Them Crooked Vultures and AC/DC and all that stuff, and you know, getting to meet Josh Homme and John Paul Jones and like hanging with all those guys a little bit, and then you know we did that one show in England where we played with Brian May and Roger Taylor and Chris Squire, and that was just like Taylor's like, hey, you guys want to come down and play? And they're like, sure. And Taylor's like, hey, how about this? How about we play Brian May and Roger Taylor songs that you've never performed live? And they're like, okay. And Brian May was like kind of scared actually. Like we were playing a song that he'd never sang live, and he was kind of a little bit nervous. But of course, it was amazing. But it was just like we're on stage with Queen right now. You know,
yeah,
it's insane.
And I'm sure he was incredibly gracious, Brian May. He seems like that.
Dude, unbelievably gracious, and also just, I mean, one of the best guitar sounds in history.
Yeah,
I say so. Also, the loudest guitar sound. It's because you know the deal, right?
It just plays with a Vox.
It's 2 Voxes. He takes out all the electronics. There's no resistors in there because there's no potentiometers. It's just on off. So it's like. So, you know, when you put all those extra knobs in, you're adding resistance, you know, especially a volume knob. So it's never going to be as loud as an amp that's just on off. His Voxes were on off, and he had 2 of them. And it's the loudest thing you've ever heard in your entire life. Like I had, you know, whatever, 35 decibel earplugs, and I could not walk in front of his amps. Like it was like being in front of a live jet engine. You know?
Wonder how he doesn't have hearing damage.
I don't know. I mean, he might, but I think my theory about hearing damage is that a lot of it's genetic. A lot of people,
Yeah, it
you're
is.
either going to have hearing damage or you're not. I mean, obviously there are things you can do to protect yourself, but I think most of it is genetic, kind of like weight is or something, you know, or like how good your teeth are.
No, I agree with you on that, because there's plenty of people who have hearing damage that didn't really play loud or that aren't even musicians.
Right.
Yeah,
Exactly. And then there are people like Taylor or Dave Grohl who never wear earplugs in their life and they can hear fine. So
yeah,
who knows?
we'll figure.
Yeah.
What was it like with working with John Paul?
Oh, I didn't work with him.
Or playing? Oh, okay.
Yeah, that was, I just got to hang with him on like a, you know, or just like, you know, be in the same room with him basically because of that tour. But
How was it? Did you get any talk with him or?
not really.
Yeah.
I think he might have, this might be me. I honestly, I can't remember I can't remember.
That's gotta be, I mean, that's gotta be I don't know if intimidating, but it's gotta be like a almost surreal thing. Like, oh, there's John Paul Jones.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not one to be starstruck kind of at all ever.
Sure.
And just because we're all humans, and also just like I feel like I'm an observer of everything. Like I'm actually, I think this is probably how most people feel, but I really feel like this. Like I'm not a part of any group, or I'm not part of a scene or anything. I feel like I'm kind of watching it, you know. And that's really how that experience was, because I'm like, I mean, I am a rock musician. I was in the calling. I can play rock. I can do whatever, but I'm not in this world. And it's really fun to just like eavesdrop and be a fly on the wall. That's why I said Forrest Gump, because it really kind of felt like that, you know.
Yeah.
So,
awesome. You know what? I'm not starstruck either. I know exactly how you feel, and for the same reason. Everybody's human, you know. You got this. Everybody's got the same worries, you know.
Yep.
No matter how much money you have, you want to pay your bills. You worry about your family, your parents, your kids. You know, all the chores you got to do. Too much to do, not enough time to. You know, we're all not that different when it comes down to it. Yeah, I know exactly. I'm really happy to hear. I've never heard anybody say that exactly that way, but that's exactly how I feel, man.
Yeah, everybody's got hangups. Everybody's got things they're working through.
No, seriously. Yeah.
It's hard for everybody.
Yeah, it is. So. It's funny though. I have had, like, I've had 850 guests on here. I was not weird with one or two people, but Ian Pace was one of them. And I said to him, Ian, man, I'm really sorry to do this to you, but I have to tell you, man, I feel like I'm 15, because I'm 57 and I've been listening to him since I'm like 5 or 6 or 7. So I'm like, fuck, and he's one of my, you know, it's like one of my musical heroes. I'm like, so I said that to him. He goes, Craig, don't worry, I know how you feel. When I'm on stage, I feel like I'm 15 too. And I was like, how cool is that? You know, that was a nice thing for him to say. So, but I totally get it, man, and I respect you know, your thoughts on that very much.
That's the beauty of Taylor Hawkins to me, is he is just a 15-year-old boy, like living his dream. Like, I get to hang out with Roger Taylor all night. Awesome. Like, I couldn't love Queen more. You know, like I get to be on stage with Rush. Like, you know, like that's how he feels. Like he feels like how you would imagine a 15-year-old would feel. That's how he feels.
Yeah.
You know?
That's cool.
And all of a sudden he is a legend himself, but it's just because he loves it, you know?
Yeah.
It was really cool to be a part of that band. It was really fun.
To watch all. Is there any plans on going out again?
No, he has another. I mean, he's touring the Coattail Riders again as a trio with a different guitar player. I almost didn't do the second tour because I lived in New York, and he's just like, I don't want to inconvenience you. I know you got stuff going on, but I did the second tour because for some reason I was in LA, and he was like, hey, why don't you come down and play like on one song? And I played guitar on one song, and he's like, God, I should have had you on the whole record. Because there's like a thing I can do on guitar. I can play melodies. I can write a new melody as a guitar part really quickly. That's like the thing that I'm really good at, which is, you know, that's a valuable skill.
It's a really good skill.
Yeah. So
that's a valuable.
He was
a valuable
man,
skill.
I should have had you play on this record, and I was like, but you know, at least I got on one track. And he was like, yeah, I'd love to have you tour again. So it was great.
Anybody who is looking for session players, that's about the most valuable skill you can need. So pay close attention and stick around. We'll tell you how to get a hold of Nate.
Right.
Yeah, that's a great skill. Wayne Krantz, how did you first get hooked up with Wayne? And you know what? I had him on the show here, and people say the first thing, you know, because he's kind of soft-spoken and quiet. I said, did he talk? I said, yeah, man, he talked the whole time. It was great. You know, it's just like a normal cup, like talking with you, anybody else, you know?
Yep.
But how'd you hook up with Wayne?
Yeah, Wayne was one of my bucket list people when I was about 17. I was like, yep, he's the coolest. Like, my dad and I went and saw Steely Dan. And as I said, my dad is really hard to impress. And, like he's taking these solos over my old school,
Yeah.
like playing like Wayne Krantz out of this amp that just sounds like it's going to blow up. And it's the most mind-blowing thing out of these, like, like you're just used to hearing like Muzak come out of speakers that big in like an amphitheater, right? Like, and Wayne's just going for it, playing this like open string shit, and just the amp sounds like overdriving like crazy. And my dad and I were just like, this guy is unbelievable, so I went like to Best Buy and bought all of his records like the next day, and just wore them out. And so I think, he was probably the only gig that I've actively pursued.
Really?
Yeah, because I was just like, man, he was such an important part of my development. Especially like I feel like the way that I play drums is entirely birthed by his music and his drummers.
Wow.
To me, the way that his drummers play is all because of him. To me, he's the drummer of that band, even though he's the guitar player.
Which drummers that he plays with influenced you most?
Zach Danziger and Keith Carlock, both.
Okay.
Yeah, both of them equally like huge. I'd say Zach maybe even more, because Zach was the first guy where I loved at that point. I loved Tony Williams and Jack DeJohnette because I heard this intellect and I heard this seed of improvisation that sounded so pure and real time that I didn't hear in like slicker, newer drummers, that were like, I'm going to play every note in the perfect place. My technique's flawless. I didn't hear the two things coming together. And Zach was the first guy where I heard those two things together. And I was like, oh, you can do them both. You can improvise like Tony Williams, but with this modern language, and it was kind of like, to me, it was like, oh, that's like, then I heard like a drum and bass record like the next month. And I was like, oh, okay, I can see how this is all going to relate, Anyway, so Zach was huge, and then Keith obviously too is a huge influence. Just his groove and the way he breaks stuff up and stuff like that. So anyway, with Wayne, when I was in the Calling, that band was touring all the time. This was right out of college, and we would spend a week at a time in New York City because RCA Records was here.
Okay.
And Billy and I would go see we'd go see Wayne all the time. And at that point, it was always Tim and Keith, because like neither Tim or Keith were famous at that point. But me and Billy were both just like, yeah, Tim and Keith, that's like the best rhythm section in the world, So we would like go see them. And Wayne remembered us because Billy had blue hair at the time, and Billy's like really good at talking about himself, and was like, yeah, we're out with this band, The Calling, and we got a #1 song, and we like, but all we want to do is like play like you and listen to you and all that stuff. And so Wayne was like, whoa, this is cool. It's like, that's really kind of random that happens, especially back then, I guess. So I kind of kept in touch with Wayne through the years. I tried to send him a record that he never listened to, which I wouldn't have either if I were him. But eventually, I think we booked a gig where Kneebody was on the bill with him. And
how'd you get that?
I think it was in New York or LA. No, it was in New York. It was just random. I think it was a random gig, because for some reason Kneebody in like 2005 or so was much more popular in New York. We would pack places in New York, even though we were an LA band. And that was at that time I lived in LA. So we'd come out to New York and play these big shows and do really well.
That's a pretty great gig with Kneebody and Wayne.
It was
pretty
great.
happening gig, man.
It was really cool. So at that point, Wayne saw us and he was like, man, I like this band and you sound like you could play with me. It was like, there's very few drummers that sound like they would work for my music, and you're one of them. And I'm like, well, there's a reason for that. I've listened to every record like a million times. So
how good did that feel? Hold on a second. How good did that feel when he came? I'm assuming he came over to you after the show.
Yeah, I mean, Wayne's really casual about stuff. He's not gonna be like, man, it wasn't as detailed as what I just said, but but he was just complimentary. He was like, sounds great,
You had to feel great about that.
No, I did, for sure. And then we did a couple other double bills, and he was just like, at that point, he called me to play on a record, and I couldn't do it because I had a conflict. And Wayne is kind of like one of those people where he's like, I'll call you once. If you can't do it, I might not call you again, kind of thing. So he didn't kind of call for a few years at that point. But then Dave Binney asked me to do an improv gig in New York City in 2008. It was me, Tim LaFave, and Wayne, and we just played free for 2 sets. David Binney's a great. Do you know who David Binney is?
I don't. Sorry.
Okay, so David's really important because he grew up around the same area as Donny McCaslin, and they're kind of like the oldest of buds. And David actually kind of put together the Black Star Band and produced a lot of those records for Donny. So Dave's a big deal. But so anyway, Dave had this gig, and I played on it, and Tim was like, "Oh man, you sound great!" Like he kind of already started calling me kind of right away for stuff, or Tim started recommending me for stuff right away. And Wayne was like, "I loved it. Let's play again," kind of thing. So when I moved to New York, he started calling me, and we started playing.
Wow.
And then so, he was the reason that I started playing bass again, because, he's like, Keith's free for this tour, and he can do it, but I kind of want to hire you for everything, and I know you can play bass. Do you want to play bass on this and then play some drums? I'm like, sure. And he'd seen some YouTube things, and this was like 2012 or something like that. And this was like a 3 or 4 week tour, which is a lot of gigs. It's like, if you're stuck with somebody who sucks, you're screwed. You know?
Totally.
He actually called me a week before the gig. He's like, "Man, are you going to be able to do this? Are you going to be able to play bass with me?" And I'm like,
cool. Oh, he didn't realize what a good bass player you were.
Well, he's just seen some YouTube things, but he's like, this guy hasn't really played. Like, he's kind of like, it's a second instrument. It could be anything,
Sure.
And he was like, "Is this going to be cool?" And I'm like, "It's going to be cool." So, yeah. So when we did a rehearsal, he was like, we did one song. He was like, "Great. Okay."
I'm assuming you've been working on his stuff the whole time.
Yeah. I mean, it's,
well, you knew it so really well from listening to it.
Say that again.
Or did you know it so well from listening to everything?
At that point, we were mostly just playing covers in a few of his songs. And again, I don't really read music. So I listen to it all, learn it by ear. But really, the heads are like one page, and then you just improvise for 20 minutes.
Yeah.
The hardest thing is remembering what song you started on. That's the thing that's really hard about Wayne. It's like, oh, is this Can't Touch This, or is this like, whatever.
So what to come back to after the
exactly.
Improv. That's so funny.
So a lot of times in bass, I like leave the first 3 notes out. I'm like, I don't know what song. Oh, right, okay. So anyway, I'd been shedding to play this gig, to my best of my abilities. And then that first tour, I kind of played 90% bass, 10% drums. And then eventually I just stopped setting the drum set up and just played bass with him. So, and then I did every gig with him until about, or almost every gig with him until about 2016 or so, 2017, something like that. And we still play on occasion. But yeah, at that point I kind of wanted to put more attention into 4. So I kind of told people like, I'm not doing as many gigs and tours right now. So
what made you move to New York, and when did you do that?
Well, so I wanted to move to New York right out of college, because I just thought.
Well, you skipped college. I didn't know you skipped the college part.
I went to college. Yeah, I went to Cal Arts.
Okay.
Which is, in, oh my God, Valencia, California. At that time, Charlie Hayden was alive, and he was teaching a class every Tuesday, which was nuts. I mean, what an experience. Because I've always been kind of jaded and a little bit wary of. I've always been too pragmatic. That's my problem, I think, as an artist and a person. It's good for long-term relationships and keeping a roof over my head and stuff like that. But in terms of the more ethereal stuff, I'm a little too pragmatic sometimes. But
so, explain what you mean by that?
Well, like not as
pragmatic's a good thing usually.
It is,
it's
but
like
as
practical.
an artist, I think artists need a little bit of ego and self-aggrandizement. I don't even know if that's a word, to really succeed. Like you do need a little bit. Like you need
to think you can do more than you can.
Yeah. My dream is that. My dream is not like, well, I should make sure that I'm balancing all the books, and which I'm not like that either. I'm just like, but I'm pragmatic, more pragmatic than just like I'm going to do that one thing because I'm the best. I've never been like that because my brain doesn't work like that. Anyway, point being, Charlie's not like that at all. Charlie Hayden was a little child in his mind who happened to be one of the best bass players who ever lived, and one of the best musicians, I think, who ever lived. And when I saw him playing music for a class and talking about how much he loved Bill Evans and Scott LaFaro, and it just felt like, this person loves music even more than I do, and I love music more than anything in the world, and this guy loves it more than that.
Yeah.
That's why he's so great, And then he would pick up like my friend's acoustic bass and play like a C major scale, and I would literally cry. It was so good. Like
Just from playing a C major scale. Yeah, this is touch.
And he's just, and everything else, the spirituality, his history, everything. It's just like, he was the guy that taught me like, oh, magic is real, you know, like music is magic. He is the living embodiment of music as magic, you know? And so that school was really good for that, because I got to see him every Tuesday and hear him talk about music and see him play music. And also at that time, Billy Higgins was alive. This is right before he died, but he used to come up and play at school. Same thing. He would just play any crappy set of cymbals, and it just, the room elevated, and everybody in the room was like, is there a seat under me? I don't even know what's happening right now. It was just stunningly beautiful. And he's just playing like a jazz ride cymbal pattern, you know? So that was a really amazing experience, that school.
What made you go to school instead of just taking off and going to New York, or just?
My parents were really encouraging. They didn't go to school, and they were kind of like, you should get more out of music than we did. You should, you know, they kind of thought that maybe I would have a better career after I went to school.
Right.
Definitely had a worse career. There's no question that if I had just gone straight into gigging, I would be making way more money than I am now. There's no
Why do you
question.
say that?
Because the way that I played coming out of college was very just straight up and down. I could play like some licks, but it was just like good two and four. I'll do gig. I was just kind of taking every gig. And it would have just ended up me playing for bigger artists, and that would have been my life. I would have played like some kind of crummy jazz gigs on the side, but I would have been like a good pop rock drummer who played with bigger artists, and that's where I would have ended up.
Interesting.
But I wouldn't have ended up with like a personal style or necessarily making my own records. I probably would have, but they wouldn't be as evolved as they are. And I certainly wouldn't have joined Kneebody. Certainly wouldn't be doing 4. So, you know, it's a
trade-off. Yeah. So you're saying is you would have been financially more further ahead than potentially that you are now, because
I probably would have been like a faceless, like nameless kind of like pop drummer or something.
Yeah.
I think, but because I went to school,
yeah,
you know, my mind was blown by watching Charlie play and Billy Higgins, and, you know, hearing Paul play piano solos and things that just opened my mind that were like very non-commercial, you know.
Right, I get it. And that you obviously grooved on.
Yeah, that I grooved on. That I really connected to, and I was like, oh, I want more out of music. Here's more, you know. So
you could have been the drummer for Survivor, or nothing against Survivor, but a band like that is what you're saying.
Maybe, although I could be wrong, because I was into like Holdsworth and Wayne Krantz, you know, before I got into school. So I could, you know, it's just that I went more in that direction because that's what school encourages, you know.
Sure.
So
interesting.
Yeah. But then I moved to New York. I would have moved to New York sooner, but I fell in love with my wife in LA, and we kind of lived there for 5 years, and then we moved out here together. Because we both wanted to live out here. And I wanted to be here because the drummers are so good. I wanted to be here because I like being around drummers where I feel completely insignificant.
Yeah, know? Of course. I totally get it.
I want to go to the Village and like watch Dan Weiss play and Marcus Gilmore and just be like, I am nothing. Like that's why I live here, you know, because I just want to be around the best people in the world. And I consider New York, in terms of that kind of drumming, to be the best in the world. So
how long have you been there now?
11 years.
That's good. So you've been with your wife quite a long time.
Yeah, we've been together for 16 years. Yeah.
Right on, man. Congratulations to you.
Thanks.
Pretty cool, man.
Yeah.
What do you like most about this? Was there a culture shock for you when you came over?
No, I loved it. Like my parents first took me here when I was 9 because we would vacation in New Hampshire, and I couldn't play drums for a month. And they drove me down to New York City just to show us New York City. And then also I played drums at like a Manny's Music. They're like, go in there and play. You know, and I remember at that time, it was like everybody in there was like aging rocker or not aging. But at that time, you know, I was 9, so everybody looked old. But a lot of like multicolored frizzy hair. And I was a pretty good drummer at 9. So it was kind of like, whoa, happening, kid, you know, kind of thing. But the thing that I remember most about New York was a crack addict hanging from a telephone pole. Like, I didn't know what it was until like 10 years later, but I was like, oh, I was a crack addict. Like we were on the Upper East Side or something. And it was just like,
hey, don't judge, man.
What's that?
I'm teasing. I said, don't judge.
No, exactly. I wasn't. I was like, you know what I thought was, this place is awesome. Like seriously, when I saw that, I was like, what is happening? I love this. I love this city. And that was the thing, that was the image that stayed with me. And I was like, I kind of fell in love with New York City at that point.
Right on, man.
It's still my favorite city in the world. I've been everywhere, and I still have that feeling when I come here where I'm like, I'm literally in love with it, you know?
Yeah, I do know because I grew up there and I love going back. The energy there, it's just as soon as you get off the plane and as much of a shithole as LaGuardia Airport is, man, it's just like right away. And then you get in the cab, it's boom, it's just magic, man.
Mm-hmm.
Did you see that thing that happened last night, by the way? My buddy sends me this video. I didn't know Joe's Pizza has like branches in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
And these guys had a violent beating. Customers and workers were beating the crap out of each other.
Whoa.
Yeah, just look up Joe's Pizza Williamsburg fight, and it was like hilarious. And apparently, this is so. My buddy's like, "What happened?" I said, "I don't know. Let me just look." And apparently, a guy bought $4.25 worth of food, and he didn't have any money, and he wanted to charge it, but the minimum is $5.
Oh my god!
So that was the source of the fight.
So
right. So my buddy's like, "Why don't you just get a second slice?" And I'm like, you don't get it. You're not from the city. I said, just imagine your IQ is 70 points lower. It's 3 a.m. You're buzzed. I said, come on, get into the mindset.
Yeah.
I said, your life sucks. Yeah, it's hot. You're frustrated. You got a ticket, the alternate side of the street parking. You got a hangover. You got to move your car in 2 hours. It's I said, that's totally normal.
Yelling at you all day for various reasons.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Yeah. Yeah. It was so funny. But that's what you said is like the crack addict hanging, like that. It's just, you look at it like, oh, it's just a crack addict hanging. Right. Next.
Right. Exactly.
It's so funny, man. It's the only place.
9-year-old from Laguna Beach, I was like, whoa, that was not an everyday thing, but really stuck with me.
That's cool. That's cool. What's your favorite New York food now?
Oh man, I don't know. It's hard to say. I mean, I love pizza, of course, but Queens is really happening for food. I think the actual level, the base level of food is a little bit higher.
I think so, from what I read. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like it's a more diverse population. I mean, where I live in Queens, it's unbelievably diverse. Like my wife and I sit on the front stoop and we're like, what language is that? What language is that? Like we don't know what a lot of these languages are of people who walk by. Like that's how diverse it is. And in like the best America is succeeding kind of way. Like to me, it seems like this is what the promise of America, and we're living in it, and it's working, and I love it,
Yeah.
And the food is the same way. It's like there's on our street, our main street, there's just amazing Mexican, amazing Thai, amazing like Yugoslavian or like Lithuanian. There's amazing like Polish, great Japanese food. It's all there, So and then you go like 2 train stops down, and it's like good hipster fare, which is a whole other subgenre of food. So it's pretty great.
That's awesome,
I just
man.
like food.
Yeah,
that's my answer.
I'm just glad you're happy. It sounds like you're really enjoying yourself. That's cool.
Uh-huh.
Tell me tough question. So far, what's your top 3 musical experiences?
Oh man. So I should say, I think I have to say the one with like the Queen guys would have to be up there, because that's just so weird. That was such an amazing thing that I got to do that. I'm gonna say one that should have been a top one, and it wasn't, but I played for 125,000 people in
holy shit
in London with the Calling
festival
concert at the park or something. I'm not sure, but it was an outdoor thing. Obviously, it was 125,000 people. That was not one of the best gigs of my life. It was really kind of just went by. Didn't really feel anything from it. I think one of my favorite gigs playing in Luxembourg at this, I think it was an airplane hangar, or it was like a, maybe a train yard or something. And they have those all over Europe that they've repurposed into performance spaces, which is just the raddest thing ever. And I was playing at a music festival as 4 at like midnight.
Wow.
And it was like really beautiful people, and it was really like, beautiful backdrop, and everybody was dancing, and I was playing my 4 set, and it was like, I'm doing this. This was my goal for this project, was to like play in Europe in these weird ass airplane hangars and have people dancing at 12. And
it was just you.
It was just me. And I was like, that was my goal, and I'm doing it right now. Holy crap. So that's really got to be one of my top gigs. So I'm going to go back there, hopefully, and do that again.
how do you contain when you're playing?
Mm-hmm.
I gotta believe there's a lot of focus, really intent. I mean, you're playing one instrument, you got to focus. You got three things going on, plus vocals sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
You got the synth, you got the drums and bass. How do you manage? You only have X amount of attention. How do you manage that?
Yeah,
If that's even a question.
No, it's a question. I can actually break it down methodically. So first of all, if you're playing the drums, you're playing 4 instruments at once. Because really the thing that drummers don't really talk about, but each limb has its own set of pros and cons.
Yeah.
If I play eighth notes with my right hand for 10 minutes, it's going to end up at a different tempo than if I play the same tempo and playing my left hand eighth notes for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
They have different brains. Every limb has its own brain. So you have to make them all work together to make it sound like it's one instrument.
Right.
But it's pretty hard.
It's incredibly hard.
It's incredibly hard. And so that's a lot of what drums is about making it such that each individual limb is good on its own, and then making sure that they work together. And that's exactly what 4 is. It's the exact same thing. So I'm a good bass player, and I can play bass and drums at the same time as if I were playing drums. It's actually maybe easier for me to do than to just play the drums, to be honest.
Well, because you've done it so much, or because you think like that now, maybe even?
I do, yeah.
Okay.
And to me, it really helps to be thinking harmonically as well as rhythmically. It's just like, it centers me more or something. So those two, because I've done those for 10,000 hours at this point or whatever. Also because I've done a lot of tours with Kneebody now. That was another thing that was really hard at first, was playing sometimes 180 hours or 180 minutes of music a night, playing fully improvised, really hard music. And my brain was physically hurt at the end of a gig. Like,
yeah, I'm sure.
Just like the muscle was tired. Like,
yeah.
I've been doing reps all day, you know? So that's gotten me really strong with that. So the way that I work on it now is like, I'm almost done with the new song, and I hold sectionals. So I do like, I'll play the drums and the bass together to make sure that the lines fit together the way that I want to. And then, I'll do drums, bass, and vocals to make sure that the words are sitting in the proper part of the beat and I'm singing the way I want to sing it, make sure that the words are good. And then I'll practice drums, bass, and keyboards together. Make sure all the voicings, I like all the voicings, make sure that none of the rhythms are throwing off each other and stuff like that. And then slowly I'll start to put it all together. And then that's how I do it. And then I just run it 100 times. And then I run it 100
so
times.
This is like, you're hitting this hard practice-wise.
I'm hitting it hard. And the thing that I know that the way that you become really good at something is you don't learn to play it so that you're like, oh, I can play it. You learn to play it so that it sounds to everyone else like it's easy, because it is easy. So
you're so right.
Because you're like, that's just base information that I've spent thousands of hours doing. I can do all this other stuff too at the same time if I want to, because my mind is free of that. That's not even baggage, So that's where I'm trying to get with 4, was like, I can play all these songs, but I can actually improvise a lot during them on individual instruments. And that's the goal. So thank you. And I spent a lot of this last year. I did my first fully improvised set of 4 on a Korg Live Instagram story. That was another goal of this project. Was I love electronic music, and I always wanted to make electronic music, but it was too boring because I'm a player and I don't want to like enter like notes like this. It's just too slow. So I always wanted to be able to improvise an entire set, and I worked up a way to do that. And my first thing was the Korg Live thing. It was cool. I thought it.
Where can people see that? Can people see it on YouTube, or is it
you can see it on their Instagram? It's like on their Instagram story. It's buried somewhere, but I think it's pretty cool. It's like kind of slow moving. It's like, it's probably definitely would work better in a live setting. Probably could have been a little bit more raucous, but anyway, regardless of any of that, it's a 30-minute improvisation that's completely improvised from beginning to end.
30 minutes.
Yeah, no preconceived notions of anything that I'm going to do. And that was one of the goals of 4, was just to be able to just get on stage with a bunch of keyboards and basses and just be like, and drums, and just be like, can I make music for 30, 45 minutes, So.
Do you think your work with Wayne sort of helped laid the groundwork for this. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I feel like I don't know how to read music. As I said, I can read music for drums, but I can't read notes. And I've developed a very strong ear because of that. You know, because I've had to learn a lot of hard music, and I've had to memorize it all. So I have a very good memory. I have a very good musical memory. I can usually just play a set that I haven't played in 2 years and just play it because I just remember it. And that's part of the Kneebody thing too. And this is definitely not bragging. It's just, this is what my particular skill set is. And part of that is because Kneebody never used sheet music. We always learned everything by ear. And when we went to do a tour, we would just get together at the first venue early and rehearse the set, you know, and that was our rehearsal. And because nobody had to bring charts and all, we played all these songs a bunch, you know, people just remember the songs, you know. And that's part of why I think Kaveh is doing so well too now, is that he has that crazy ability to learn a song like this and retain it, which a lot of bass players in his field do not have.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like he has this superpower that like you can't really get unless you go to this like boot camp of memorization. Which
that's funny, man.
In Kneebody. So yeah, my playing with Wayne though is absolutely 100%. It's basically like proto. His music is like proto electronic music because it's all 4, 8, 16 bar phrases, like which electronic music is. It's all these events that last a certain amount of time. That's kind of a predictable human, you know, biome amount of time that like people are used to hearing things in 4 and 8 and 16 bar phrases. And that's how electronic music is. So you're like, hey, you wanted something new to come up in 8 or 16 bars, you know, to keep people's interest. But then if you can remember the first thing you did, you know, like 3 episodes ago and bring that back, you know, like all these tricks to kind of make it interesting, you know, and that's all, a lot of that's because of Wayne and because of Kneebody.
That was funny, interesting and funny what you said with Wayne, where you're like, the toughest thing is remembering where you, which song you're playing, so you know where to come back 15 minutes later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's how lost you get with that music, which is kind of hard to understand if you do a lot of gigs, like if you're playing with Taylor Swift or something like that, or something.
Yeah, conventional, like non-improv music.
Yeah, you're doing a gig where you're just playing the gig, and it's like you can't really imagine losing yourself for 20 minutes, but it's like you're really just like in a dryer with 3 other guys, you know, or 2 other guys for 20 minutes.
That's like, funny.
Oh, that's the outside. You know, like you don't have to be conscious of where you're coming back to, really, because you're just bouncing around with these people. So anyway.
Yeah. Lefebvre is a good guy. He's smart at that, man.
Tim Lefebvre. No, he's one of the pioneers too, I think. He's a really, really important bass player. Because I think the way he was like, to me, he was like the beginning of a new style of bass playing, because he was really like, is really rooted in bass, you know. He's not like a Jocko player, he's like a bass player.
Yeah.
But he's really up on electronic music and really wants, and was really bringing all those influences into his electric playing. I also felt like he was very much Wayne's Charlie Hayden, like the way that Charlie was to Ornette Coleman, where Ornette would just play free stuff and Charlie has perfect pitch, so it would almost sound like they're playing changes, you know. But that's just because Charlie has perfect pitch and he's just following him. That's how Tim was with Wayne. Like, it's just like they're just jamming, but Tim makes it sound like this is all a song, you know.
Tim's also the Kevin Bacon of music. What was that? Remember, like 7 Steps from Kevin Bacon?
Oh, right. Yeah.
Tim's. It's amazing how many people have worked with Tim, and I'm like, I finally heard the guy's name so many times. I'm like, I said, I got to get this guy on my show. Yeah. I mean, like every 7th person was like Tim Lefebvre. I was like, who? And then I'd expect someone to say Tim Lefebvre at a certain point in time.
Exactly.
Already,
He's such a cool guy too.
So. He's a cool guy. Yeah. Low points, man. Tell me some of the low points or dark periods you've had to deal with, and how'd you get through them?
This is going to be a disappointing question because I've never really had any dark points. Partly because of my pragmatism, and partly because I'm a pretty damn evenly keeled person. I haven't really had a lot of low points. I think the hardest thing for me, honestly, has been putting any energy into 4 and trying to make it go outside of the bubble that things usually live inside, you know. That's been the hardest thing that I've had to deal with as a musician in the last 20 years, is like, hey, I'm trying something, you know.
Yeah.
That's it's hard to do that, especially because it's like it doesn't work the way you think it's going to, you know. So
nothing usually does. You know, I have found in my own experience,
yeah,
not necessarily in music, but the things that you think are going to be hard often aren't
right.
anywhere near as hard as you thought they were. But the things sometimes you don't anticipate them being hard, they're like, whoa, this is a lot more work than I thought. It's really weird. I don't know. Now, maybe I don't know, maybe if that's not congruent with what you're saying with four, maybe you thought it would be like take off, or I don't know, whatever. But what are the hard?
I don't know what I thought either. It's emotionally a little bit harder, and that's the thing that's weird to me, is that it's
Okay.
more of an emotional involvement that I'm used to. It's kind of like what you were talking about, rescuing cats.
It's all you.
It's all me, exactly.
Yeah.
But it's like what you're talking about, rescuing cats, where you're just like, I'm just like, why do I care about this cat so much? You know, but it's like that obviously with your own art, you know. And, but part of the reason that I wanted to do four is because I don't want to be responsible for other people. Like, you know, I've
that's a great reason to work for yourself.
Yeah, like I've done a bunch of gigs, you know, playing my old music, playing guitar and singing, and hiring drummers and having my wife play bass with me. And I did one tour with Arthur Natek, booked it, who's the drummer of Tigran Hamasyan now. He booked us like a Swiss tour for us. And it was great, but I was just like, I don't want to feel responsible for these people. I want to pay them $4,000 a week. I'm not going to be able to afford that ever, you know, and until I can, I'm not going to do this. So I would rather just tour on my own and not make any money than have to feel responsible for these people. So that was part of the four thing, was like, hey, I can tour this. I can probably afford to tour it, you know.
So let's do this. Let's talk more about four so people can get hip to it and then get turned on to it.
Sorry, this is so long.
No, it's not long at all. No, it can never be too long, only too boring. It's like music.
Okay. Right.
You know, seriously, you can never be too long, just too boring. Okay, so let people know what four is. It's your band. It's you.
So four is me playing all the instruments at once. I have a YouTube channel where it's literally just live performances of me in my apartment playing these songs. And these songs are part of the record that came out, and I'm almost done with the second record. That's what the project is. It's like what you see is what you get. I play a take. There's no editing. That's just what it would sound like live. You know, it's kind of like jazz. It's like a jazz version of electronic / pop rock, whatever.
That's a great description.
And I just felt like I've never seen that done before, and that was exciting to me. Like, people are starting to play multiple instruments at once, but people aren't really playing music this complex without the aid of overdubs or punches. You know, and just leaving it with warts and all, especially at a time like this in a crazy, you know, where everything can be fixed. Like, anybody can sound like Christina Aguilera now if you have the right software, you know. So it's like, I wanted to be like, no, this.
You can even look like her if you have the right software.
Right, exactly. That's even easier, I think.
Yeah, but you're probably right.
I'd like, this is what it would have sounded like in 1970, you know, and that's not many people are doing that in any kind of music now. Classical music's edited, jazz is edited, everything's edited. So I was just like, I'm going to do something pretty vulnerable and just let people watch the progression of it. And either they'll like it, or they'll like the early stuff better, or they'll like the later stuff better, or they'll be like, oh, this is too rough for me, or whatever. But I just want to do it this way, you know? So
how's the reception to it? I would imagine the reception's been good, though.
It's okay.
You got 1 million views on some of those videos.
Yeah, I mean, it's okay. It's confusing to people. I don't know. It's weird for me to say how I think other people think about it, but
yeah.
I'm not. Another problem with me is I'm not really good at like seizing opportunities, and I'm not good at kind of making people feel like they're a part of something. You know, like if somebody's like,
like building a community.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I love this so much. Sometimes they're waiting for you to give them something in return, whether it's acknowledgement or anything. I'm not good at any of that stuff. Maybe none of this stuff matters. It probably doesn't. I don't even know what I'm talking about. But the reception has been okay, is what I'm trying to say. But at this point, I don't care. As long as I can afford to do it, that's what I care about. And so, you know, I just kind of keep doing it, and slowly but surely doing these little tours, and I'm happy. So
how are you getting booked on tours?
Just myself. Sometimes people write me and they're like, "Hey, I'm a huge fan. I saw you with Kneebody. Would you want to bring 4 here next time you're here?" And so I'll book it. You know, I'll buy the plane tickets and work out the fee and go there myself. And then I've done a couple tours where I'm like, "Hey, Instagram, I'll be in Switzerland on this date. You know, can I get some other gigs?" And sometimes people will help me book gigs and stuff like that. So.
Oh, so if you're traveling for other music stuff.
Sometimes that, or sometimes I'll have 1-4 gig as an anchor, and I'll be like, "Hey, world, can you get me some other gigs?" And then people will.
Oh, that's great.
That way. Yeah, but yeah, other times, yes, all it takes for me with 4, I bring a bass, all the synths, all the stands, and then I mix the show too. So I bring, but it all fits in 2 suitcases, including cymbals.
That is phenomenal.
Thanks. So
I mean,
if I have to tour with Donny McCaslin, say, playing drums, all I have to do is bring 1 extra suitcase and I can go do a 4 gig afterwards.
Right.
So it's pretty cool, you know, in that way.
I'm
extra baggage fees.
Is Rabbit the thing, like if somebody has time for one thing to watch?
Yeah, watch that one. It's funny because that was the one where I was like, I want to write an introducing song, you know?
It is. It's a perfect, that's what it is, man. It's a great introducing song.
That's funny. Thank you. Yeah. And it's like sometimes those are the best songs, and I know they are because I remember like reading about like Kurt Rosenwinkel's first record, and there's a song on there that was like an exercise for a Berkeley like class, and it's my favorite song on the record, you know.
That's funny.
So it's like sometimes those turn out to be really great songs, and so that's the one that basically has gotten me the most attention. It's the
first song on the record, which is great. Yeah, it's a great opening song.
I ever did.
Yeah. Oh, it is. The first thing you did is 4.
Yeah.
It's really fucking complicated, man. I don't know how you're doing all that. I mean,
thanks. Yeah, that one's really easy. That's the easiest one by far.
Really?
Yeah. The ones where I sing are approximately 45 times as hard as that.
Approximately 45 times.
I'm just saying, like, it's so much harder. Like, Rabbit is all stuff that I could do in my sleep, but like as soon as I start singing, it's like all this other shit happens. It's so much harder.
Yeah, because once you start singing, the meter goes. It's really hard to hold that down.
It's hard to hold the meter down. The other thing that you don't really think about is that your cranial cavity is resonating, right?
Right.
So you're wearing these in-ears, and all of a sudden your skull is resonating.
Oh,
and you
right.
have to hear 3 other instruments that you're playing over your voice, which you're also trying to sing in tune. So that
God,
it just makes the whole thing just almost impossible. Like once you start singing. But I really wanted to sing because for me, it's like I view my early 3 records as like some of the more important things that I've done in my life in terms of like just how I feel about myself, you know, like I feel an attachment to those records, and I really wanted to, you know, have that kind of songwriting in 4. So I really wanted to do that.
I think the thing that's so catchy with 4 is, and you know this already, which is probably why you did it, the opening line of that synth. There's something about it that's very compelling. Like it's almost impossible not to let it catch your ear no matter what you're doing. And there's got to be one note or one set of notes that hook everybody in.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
It's very,
I think it's interesting. Yeah. I think it's aggressive. It's because it's aggressive and
uncommon. It's not something you hear.
It's uncommon. Yeah. But it's still repeating and it's catchy. And it's also, it's atonal. It's an Aphex Twin scale. It actually is. It's an Aphex Twin atonal scale.
Wow.
So that's part of why it hooks the ear. It's not like Western tuning.
Yeah. The actual, what's the word I'm looking for? The tone, you know, it's nothing I can describe even. It's not like a guitar tone. It's not even a regular conventional synth tone. It's almost like a little space dude talking.
Right.
You know,
I know what you mean.
Yeah. And it's like, so that's what it is, man. It's like a vocal.
Yeah.
It's like someone talking over a vocoder or something like that. And that's for me anyway, that's what, like, it's impossible because I listened to the record, I liked it. And then I started listening to the videos, and I'm like, And then I put the record back on again just because I wanted to hear that. I just listened to the opening a few times
Right.
because it was really cool, you know. So I think that you did a great job on that, picking that as a first tune, and you know that you're kind of like your headline track there, man.
Yeah, that's cool. Thanks. That's the thing I love about synthesizers is they're emotional instruments, even though they're just,
Well, you
whatever,
make them
electricity.
emotional.
That's the thing is they're what you make of them,
Yeah.
But it's like my dad was playing a Moog, he gave me his Moog actually, but it was one of the early serial numbers. Like he was dragging a Moog around like 1971 or something.
Wow.
And at that time, the sax player was like in Honk was like, man, those are made for like classical music. Like you shouldn't be playing that in a rock band. That's not what those are made for.
It's so funny, like when someone says like you shouldn't be doing something in music.
My entire career has been made of trying to do things that you shouldn't do.
Yeah, right.
But that's the thing is like, yeah, it's synthesizers are really versatile emotionally, and that's what I love about having a synthesizer based project.
Yeah. What have you listened to recently? What's the last song you listened to or last music?
Okay, so I've been listening to, speaking of that, academic electronic music, I've been listening to Mort Subotnick's first two records, Wild Bull and Silver Apples, or what is the first one called? Silver Apples to the Moon. That's what it's called. Silver Apples to the Moon. And Silver Apples to the Moon was the first electronic record ever in 1967. And Morton Subotnick helped design the Buchla 100E, I think, with Don Buchla, who was, who was Moog's competitor. He was the West Coast Moog. And Silver Apples to the Moon was a none such record that they commissioned him to record because they were like, hey, they came down his studio and they're like, hey, we heard you're cooking up this weird ass music on this weird synthesizer thing. Can we pay you to release a record of this? And he was like, sure. So he worked on it apparently for 18 hours a day for like a year.
Oh my God.
Buchla, because Buchla is like a atonal, really weird instrument. And he said when he premiered it in New York in 1967 or 68 or something like that. And he said when he started the second movement, people started dancing. And he was like, I didn't intend this to happen. But it was the first time that anybody had ever heard sample and hold. Sample and hold is just immediately funky. It's like if you put something on a random LFO, it's just, doing something rhythmic, it's just funky right away. So people started dancing and it was like, that's the first EDM, like,
wow,
was that. But it's a very academic record. It's very much like, like a Xenakis record or like a Xenakis piece or something. Like it's like very like very modern kind of like theoretical classical music that's, the themes are kind of buried underneath like a lot of layers of intent and they come back in weird ways and there's a lot of atonality and it's pretty hard to listen to, but it's amazing. I love it. So I've been listening to those because also the Buchla is just like an incredible sounding instrument, really powerful. And then I keep coming back to Genevieve Artadi's newest record that came out 2 years ago, and I keep like rediscovering songs that I didn't remember that are really good.
What does she do?
Oh, so she's a singer songwriter, and she's one half of that band Knower. Lewis Cole. Do you know who Lewis Cole is?
No, I don't.
Okay, you gotta check these guys out. Lewis is like, I think Lewis is the Frank Zappa of our time, but he's more likable than Frank Zappa. Like he has more pop appeal.
Yeah,
he has the same level of wit and zaniness and kind of brilliance.
Lewis Cole,
but he can kind of like, but there's like some Michael Jackson in there too, And he's a monster drummer that we've known each other for like 15 years or something at this point. But anyway, him and Genevieve had this band called Nowhere together, and Genevieve has started releasing solo records too that are really, really great. So her solo record is I really, really digging, and then also the latest Field Music record is really cool. They're a band from England, and it's a couple of brothers who make like really great timeless pop rock in the English tradition.
Field music. Cool. And then, give me a lot of homework here.
Yeah, and just like anything Tony Williams, like listening to, listening to the Miles stuff with Tony for the millionth time.
You know what, man? I've been listening to some You ever get into Tommy Bolin by any chance?
No, never checked it out.
Man, he was such a good, not just a great lead guitarist, but his rhythm guitar work was great. He did a lot of fusion stuff, and the drumming on those records is phenomenal. I mean, I was just blown away. And it's kind of hard to know who does what track, but it's great drumming.
That's cool. I don't know if you know who I saw was on your show that I'm not sure if you know that I play with also is Tim Miller.
Oh yeah, from Boston.
Yeah, so he's another guitar.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, another like amazing guitar player that I've gotten to work with.
Yeah,
since this is a guitar.
I did not know you play. Yeah, he's a very good guitarist.
Yeah, so I'm on his latest record.
Oh, cool.
And I've been playing like a lot of his live
on
shows.
as drums or bass or both.
Drums.
Okay, very cool.
And then
so you're known. I mean, your session stuff is usually your bread and butter is drumming.
I'm a drummer.
Yeah.
Quotes,
okay.
I'm a drummer.
Yeah.
You know.
It's hard to not to believe that. It's hard to own that. It's hard for a third party to own that, watching you like do all this cool shit like really well. It's, but obviously you've established yourself as a drummer and everybody knows you as a drummer, but you know what I mean? As a new person getting introduced to you, I'm like, wow, this guy's awesome. Like you could tell me to do anything. I'd be like, okay, that's fine.
Thanks.
Give me your top 3 Desert Island discs.
Oh man.
Just for this minute.
Okay, so I would say this unnamed Richard Steckel record from 1979 that only myself and my mom have ever heard.
Okay.
That would be number 1. Shit. I would probably say maybe Nefertiti for the second one. And then I would probably say, let's say Aphex Twin Zero for the third one.
Okay. Great. You're very on top of that. Most people really struggle with that, Nate.
Well, Kaveh taught me how to do that.
What's that?
Kaveh taught me how to do that.
Did he?
Yeah. He's just like, just answer.
Just answer.
Nobody cares. Just
no
answer.
one's checking.
Exactly. They're just. He's like, just say sympathy for the Devil's your favorite song. Just say it. You know.
I'm going to review this and get back to you with your grade later. So one time I had a guest on her. I could remember who it is if I thought about it, but he filled out all these questions and sent them back to me.
Right.
And I said, do you want me to grade them? What what am I supposed to? That's very kind of you, but what am I supposed to do with this?
Some people really don't want to be misquoted, and they really want to think about their answers and stuff like that. I'm not like that.
It was one out of 850.
Totally cool.
Yeah, that was one out of 850. No one ever did that. One person. Yeah, I was like, okay, I circled it. I put an E at the top, and I circled it like E for excellent, and I sent it back to him.
Red pen, I hope.
Yes, I did.
Good.
All right. Best decision you ever made?
Calling my wife for a date.
Nice.
No question. Oh, speaking of which, I got to go because she's got to go to a gig.
Like right now, you got to split.
2 seconds.
Okay, so let me ask you one last question. Biggest change in your personality over the last 10 years, and how much of that change has been intentional, and how much has just been a part of aging?
All of it has been a part of aging. I'm not capable of doing anything that doesn't come naturally to me. So I think I'm kind of generally shy and soft-spoken, and I kind of come off slightly not warm to people, I think, sometimes. But I think that has changed a little bit. I think I've just gotten better at talking to people. And also, I've become less interested in being a utility person that can do everything, because I really can do everything. I mean, to some degree. Like,
yeah, for sure.
I can do everything, but I can do a formidable job in very many aspects of music.
Yeah.
But I started putting more value on what I want to say, which is what every musician says. So that's not interesting at all. But that's what 4 is just like, okay, I'm going to take some me time here. That was a big step. It was like, I'm going to do 4. I actually told people I'm not going to play bass with them when I started doing 4. I was like, Wayne, don't call me for bass because I'm working on 4. And he's like, okay, I respect that.
Good for you, man.
So thanks.
Well, I hope you get to continue that for a long time. I would love everybody to check out Nate Wood on YouTube. Go to Nate Wood Music and subscribe to his YouTube. Follow him on Instagram, Nate Wood Music, same thing. Please check out the new record. It's 4 is the title of the project, and it's exit, x.it. Very cool. Also, if you are interested in working with Nate, we didn't even get into this. He's mastered literally hundreds and hundreds of records. He's a great mastering engineer. If you want to hook up with him there, two ways. Go to just look up on Google Nate Wood Mastering, and the website called Curse of Boom Mastering will come up. And also, if you're looking to if you want to work with Nate to have him play some tracks on your record, if he's available, same thing. Message him on the Nate Wood, on the Curse of Boom Mastering, or message him on Instagram. But either way, subscribe to his YouTube channel, the Nate Wood Music. Thank you, man. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Yeah, man. Thanks. And you don't come off aloof, or you
Oh, I'm good at interviews for some reason.
So, you are, man. Very, very. You're super intellectual. Super. I feel like I needed to study before. I should have studied before. Should have read a random SAT.
You're really
book.
good at this, so it's easy.
Thank you very much.
That's the thing. It's like, no, but that's really the thing about, it's hard to be a good interviewer because you've got to figure out a way to get people to talk, and that's a real skill,
Oh, anyway. Thanks, man.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Well, you're great to talk to, so it was easy. Cool. Everybody, thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this, please share it on your social media channels. Thanks very much to Nate Wood. Again, everybody check him out. Nate Wood Music on YouTube and Instagram. Check out his new record, 4. It's the name of the project is 4. The record is XIT. It's on Apple Music, Spotify, wherever else you stream from. And most important, remember that happiness is a choice. So choose wisely.
That's right.
Be nice. What's that? It is, bro.
I
right?
agree with that.
Yeah.
100%.
Right on, man. Be nice. Go play your guitar or your drums or your bass and have fun. Till next time, peace and love, everybody. I am out. Thanks so much for everything, brother.
Thank you.